It is the third age of Middle Earth. The forces of the great shadow of the east are moving, and the storm clouds of war are on the horizon. You must lead the free peoples of Middle Earth in an epic struggle against the Dark Lord of Mordor. The Ring of Power, once thought to be lost, has reappeared in the Shire and has made its way to the elven stronghold of Rivendell. Following the Council of Elrond, it has been decided that the ring must be brought to the fires of Orodruin and destroyed once and for all. A party of 9 brave individuals has been formed of men, dwarfs, elves, and hobbits, and they have united to perform the arduous task. But the nations of the free peoples, save the elves, are fractured and suspicious of one another. You must unite the nations of dwarfs, elves, and men to form a united front against the forces of darkness, using all of your strength and cunning to defeat the Dark Lord and establish peace throughout the land. If you fail in your quest, all of Middle Earth will be covered with a shroud of inescapable darkness.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Solo Gamers Club. Tonight we're going to be testing an alternate version of my solitaire system for War of the Ring called Alone in Middle Earth, Shadowbot 3.0a. This new version of the bot has been modified to hopefully produce a more realistic and streamlined solo experience. The tables have been revised and now only a d20 is required for play. In this playthrough, I'll be using both expansions and the Council of Rivendell optional rules. For the sake of those that have not viewed my previous videos on War of the Ring, I'll provide a quick overview of the solo system. In essence, the gamer controls the free peoples as in a standard game. There are no changes to the rules as written. The player makes the decisions for the free peoples as they would during a live game. When the shadow player must take a turn, their actions are directed by a Shadowbot. A d20 is rolled, and Sauron's gaze table is consulted. This will result in the shadow either focusing on military operations or in their search for the ring. If a military action has been rolled, another d20 is rolled to determine the focus location of Sauron's gaze. This will specify an objective region for the turn. A specific action is selected by following the priorities listed on Table D, Military Priorities chart. If a search for the ring has been directed, follow the priorities listed on Table E, Search for the Ring Priorities chart. This procedure is followed throughout the action phase until the shadow player has only a single action die remaining for the round. In this case, we do not roll on Sauron's gaze table, but instead use the action die to best effect in any capacity. As I have stated in a previous video, the system is designed as an aid to the solo player. It is a method that provides the solo player with a quick and easy way of operating the shadow player with only 1 or 2 die rolls. It's meant to simulate the play of a real opponent. It's intended to allow the player to experience the game instead of wading through endless flowcharts, and to preserve the game's original flow and elegance. Currently, I'm working on another small variant, similar to the Council of Rivendell optional rules, that will chart the Ringbearer's travels from Hobbiton to Rivendell. This will modify the setup of the standard game by providing the Free Peoples with an advantage or disadvantage based on the results of the playthrough. Eventually, I'd like to combine all these elements along with the Battle of the Five Armies and the Fate of Erebor variant into a grand alternate retelling of the entire Lord of the Rings story. But for now, let's put this new version of the Shadowbot through its paces, and we'll see if it performs as I intended. To begin, I've created several tables to help randomize the effects of the Council of Rivendell optional rules. This will determine if any of the companions will be using their alternate forms, and if so, whether they will begin the game outside the Fellowship. I'll bring the tables up that I'm going to be using for this procedure. I'll make the rolls off camera, and I'll show the results. After consulting the tables and making the rolls, I've determined that Legolas and Gimli will begin the game in their alternate forms, and they'll also start outside the Fellowship in their places of origin. Gimli is going to begin the game in Erebor, and Legolas will begin in the Woodland Realm. As two companions will be starting outside the Fellowship, the Shadow player will receive 2 Shadow action tokens. We'll begin with Phase 1, that's recover action dice and draw event cards. The Free Peoples player will begin with 4 action dice, and the Shadow player will begin with 7. The Free Peoples player will begin with the event cards Athelius, King Bran's Men, and the Stone of Eric. Shadow player has drawn his cards, and we'll keep those unrevealed until we need to reveal them. The next phase is the Fellowship phase. Fellowship is going to begin the game in Rivendell. And Gandalf the Grey Wanderer, will begin as the guide. Phase 3 is the Hunt allocation. We're going to consult Table A, Hunt allocation table, and roll a d20. That will determine how many dice will be placed in the Hunt box. At the bottom of the table, you'll notice some modifiers that might be applicable, and we'll apply those to the roll. We'll be gaining a +1 to the roll. Fellowship is in Rivendell, and the Fellowship progress marker is less than 5. Here's the roll. Roll is a 4, that's modified to a 5. That means that the Shadow player is going to place 1 die in the Hunt box. Step 4 is our action roll. Free Peoples player will be rolling 4 action dice. And they ended up with 2 Will of the West, a muster die, and a character die. As the Shadow player has placed 1 die in the Hunt box, they'll be rolling 6 action dice. And they have 1 additional eye, which will be added to the Hunt box, bringing that up to a total of 2. They also have 3 muster army, 1 army die, and an event die. That'll be the starting dice pools for the turn. And now we move on to Phase 5, and that's our action resolution. Free Peoples have 4 action dice, and the Shadow player has 5, so technically we could pass, but I think we're going to take advantage of having the initiative. Now with Gimli and Legolas starting outside of the Fellowship, we have a good opportunity to bring the elves and the dwarves into the conflict, I think, a little sooner than we normally would, so we will have to keep that in mind. I think our first action will be, we're going to use one of the Will of the West die, and we're going to play that as a character die, and we're going to advance the Fellowship. So the character action die is played, and we're going to advance the Fellowship progress 1 step. So we're at 1 now. But now, Shadow Player gets a chance at the hunt. He has 2 eyes in the hunt box, so he'll be rolling 2d6, and he's looking for a result of 6 for success. And here's the hunt roll. And he has a success. He has a 6. So that will entitle him to draw a hunt tile. Now, as we're using the Lords of Middle Earth expansion, we've got 2 Golem tiles, I should say Smeagol tiles, are in the hunt tile draw bag. So we'll see what happens here. Here is our selection. And it comes out to be 1 damage, and the Fellowship is revealed. So the Fellowship is now revealed, and we're going to use the ring to absorb that amount of corruption. So the corruption marker will be moved up 1. And now we have to move the Fellowship 1 space, 1 region on the board. So the Fellowship is going to move 1 region. They'll move into the Fords of Brunnen. This token is removed from play, and the character die is placed into the hunt box, which will modify future rolls, giving the Shadow Player a +1 to each die. Well, that was an unfortunate start for us. So we're going to move the Fellowship marker to 0 progress, and they are revealed. Now we're going to move on to a Shadow Player turn. We begin by making a d20 roll and consulting Sauron's gaze table. This will tell us where his focus will be for the turn. There'll be 1 die roll modifier that will be active, and that is +1 if the Fellowship is revealed. Here is the d20 roll. The roll is a 10, and that's modified to an 11. Sauron's gaze will be military matters, and to resolve this, we're going to consult tables C and D. We'll begin by making a roll on table C using a d20, and that will tell us where Sauron's focus will be. Here's the roll. The roll is a 15, and that's Mordor. His primary objective is Osgiliath. So we know his focus is in the Mordor region. So we're going to consult table D, the military priority chart. Starting with the letter A, we'll move from A down to I till we get an action that would coincide with the location, Mordor, the target, Osgiliath, and we'll see what we come up with. First one is use a muster die to bring any minion in play that adds an action die to the pool. Now there's only 2 minions that we could bring in that would give us an extra action die to follow that priority. That would either be the Witch King or the Mouth of Sauron. Now neither of those can be brought in with the criteria we have. Now we could bring in the Witch King, Chief of the Ringwraiths, but that is more attuned to a search for the ring. So this is a military matter, so we would have to look to see if we can bring the Black Captain in or the Mouth of Sauron. Neither of those will match the criteria, so we'll move on to the next one. It says use a muster die as a diplomatic action to advance the focus location on the diplomatic track. That we can do. So we're going to play a muster army die, and we're going to move the diplomatic track, bringing Sauron to the at war box. Now the Free Peoples are up, and obviously with the Fellowship being revealed, we're going to have to try to hide them. So we're going to play a character die, and we're going to hide the Fellowship. And that's going to allow us to flip that back to the hidden side. And now the Shadow Player is up, and we're going to once again consult his gaze table. Now that the Fellowship is hidden, there'll be no die roll modifiers. Here's the roll. The roll is a 4, and that's military matters again. So we're going to roll another d20, consulting the Table C military table, and find out where Sauron's focus is located. This time the roll is a 10, and that is going to be Isengard, with the primary objective being Helm's Deep. So his focus is on Isengard. We'll go through Table D military priority chart. Use a muster die to bring any minion into play that adds an action die to the pool. Well, the only minion we could bring in at Isengard is Saruman, but unfortunately for him to be played, we have to be at the at war box. So we'll continue on. Use a muster die as a diplomatic action to advance the focus location on the diplomatic track. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to play a muster army die as a muster die, and we're going to advance Isengard to the at war box. So Isengard is now at war. We'll move back to the Fellowship player, and these are the dice and cards that we have available to us. Now, I don't think we want to risk another movement of the Fellowship, so I think we're going to use those action dice to play one of our event cards. And I think we're going to play a muster die, and we're going to play King Bran's Men. Recruit 2 North regular units in Dale, then draw 1 strategy event card. So we're going to place 2 regular North units in Dale, and then we're going to draw a strategy card. And that card is revealed to be Celeborn's Galadriel. Recruit 1 Elven unit, regular or elite, in Lorien. Then draw 1 strategy event card. All right. And now it's the Shadow player's turn. He has 3 action dice and 2 action tokens available to him. We'll make the roll on the Sauron's Gaze table. There are no modifiers. The roll is an 18, and his focus now is on the ring. So we're going to consult Table E. Table E, first priority is use a muster die to bring the Witch King, Chief of the Ring Wraiths, into play. And the criteria for bringing in the Witch King, Chief of the Ring Wraiths is if the Fellowship is not in an unconquered Free People stronghold, you may use a muster action die result to play the Chief of the Ring Wraiths in the region containing the Fellowship, or to replace the Black Captain in his current region. So we're going to do that. We're going to play a muster army die, and we are going to place the Chief of the Ring Wraiths in the same region as the Fellowship. So the Chief of the Ring Wraiths is placed into the Fords of Brunnen, where he's hunting the Fellowship. We have 1 Will of the West die remaining, and these event cards. And I think we're going to play our Will of the West die as a muster die. And we're going to play Celeborn's Galadriel. Recruit 1 Elven unit, regular or elite, in Lorien, and then draw 1 strategy event card. So we take 1 Elven elite in this case. I'm going to select, and we'll place that in Lorien, take that from the supply. Now we get to draw a strategy card. And we draw Through a Day and a Night. Play on a Free People's army containing a companion. Move the army containing the companion or companions up to 2 regions. The regions must be free for the purposes of army movement, and no Free People's units may be picked up or dropped off along the way, other than possibly splitting an army initially. All right. And that's going to exhaust all of our action dice for this turn. So that means that the Shadow player is going to have a kind of a free reign here, and we'll begin with his Gaze roll. And here's his D20 roll. He rolls a 19, and that's going to be the ring. So we're going to consult Table E and come up with an action. Now we've already brought in the Chief of the Ring Wraiths into play, so we'll move on to B, and that says play a character event that will target the Fellowship. So we'll take a look at our character card and see what we've got. And that is the Palantir of Orthanc. Play on the table if Saruman is in play. Well, that's not possible, so we'll move on to the next priority. It says play a faction card that allows a faction to target the Fellowship. Well, we have no factions in play, but our faction card is Evil Things. Play if the Fellowship is not in a region containing a Free People settlement. Move all spiders up to 2 regions, then if at least 1 spider figure is in a region with the Fellowship, discard 1 spider figure to draw a hunt tile. If the tile shows an eye, discard it without effect. Otherwise, follow the rules for a successful hunt. Well, that would be a valid card, but we're unable to play that because the spiders are not active yet. We'll move on to the next. Priority D is if the Fellowship is not in a Free People stronghold, use an action die to position Nazgul or armies into the last known position of the Fellowship to gain hunt rerolls. Well, that is a possibility. Now, the Shadow player is already gaining a bonus for the Nazgul, the Chief of the Ringwraiths, in that location. So we're going to try to get some army units into that location to give us an additional reroll. We won't be able to reach it this turn, but we can start moving towards it. So we're going to play an army marker. It's going to allow us to move 2 separate forces. The first force is going to be just a single move. We want to keep a garrison there, so we're going to move 1 regular army into Holland. For our second action, I think we're going to move to Dal Guldur in the event that the Fellowship takes the eastern approaches. So what we'll do there is we're going to move this entire force, with the exception of 1 regular, into North Anduin Vale. And we're going to eventually attempt to form a cordon here between there and Moria to give us reroll advantages in the hunt. Now, part of the solo rules is when the Shadow player is down to their last die, we don't use the Sauron's Gaze table. Instead, we use those dice anywhere on the board that gives us the maximum advantage. So in this case, we have an event die, so we can either play an event card or draw an event card. So we'll see what we have available to us. We have a Horde from the East. Play if the Southrons and Easterlings are at war. Well, they're currently not, so that one won't work. The Palantir of Orthanc. Play on the table if Saruman is in play. Well, he's not. Finally, we have Evil Things. Play if the Fellowship is not in a region containing a Free People settlement. That one is true, but we cannot fulfill the other portion of the card, so we won't play that. So in this case, we can use that event die in any purpose we choose to. And I think the best thing we can do, since the Fellowship is not in a Free People stronghold, is we're going to play that event die to draw a character card. And we'll leave that undisclosed for the moment. We always want to keep those cards unknown to us as the player for as long as possible. And that makes the playthrough more exciting. Shadow player has no action dice remaining, but they do have 2 action tokens, and those are pretty much free for us to play whenever we choose to. I think I'm going to play the diplomatic action token, and that's going to allow us to move the Southrons and Easterlings 1 step on the diplomatic track. So we're going to play that token, and the Southrons and Easterlings move 1 step closer to at war. We have 1 action token remaining, but we're limited to playing only 1 token per turn. So that's going to end the activations for the Shadow player. We would move on to step 6. That's our victory point check. As we know, there are no victory points tallied yet, so we'll move on to a new round. And that, in essence, is how the solo rules work. We would continue using this procedure until either side would attain victory. We'll begin again with Phase 1, recover action dice and draw event cards. Shadow player is going to recover 3 action dice and 1 from the hunt pool. That means that the Shadow player will have to place at least 1 die in the hunt for the ring box. But for the time being, he is going to recover 7 dice plus 1 extra one because we have the Witch King, Chief of the Ring Wraiths, has been brought into play. And that's going to award them an extra action die. And we draw the event cards Challenge of the King, Guards of the Citadel, and March of the Ents. That gives us a total of 4 standard event cards and 2 faction events. We draw 1 card from each deck for the Shadow player, and we're going to keep those hidden until we need to reveal those. And that's going to give the Shadow player 5 standard events, 2 faction events, and they still have 1 Shadow token from the beginning of the game. Next up is going to be the Fellowship phase, and we have the option of changing the guide. We could have Strider take over with his abilities. His guide ability would allow us to use any action die to hide the Fellowship. But I think we're going to keep Gandalf the Grey for the moment as the guide. His ability allows us to, after we use an event action die to play an event, we can immediately draw 1 event from the same deck. Now it's Phase 3, and that's our hunt allocation. We're going to consult Table A and roll a d20 to find out how many dice will be placed in the hunt for the ring box. There are no modifiers that are currently active, so we'll make the standard roll. The roll is a 12, and that indicates that the Shadow player is going to place 2 eyes in the hunt box. And he places the 2 eyes in the hunt box. Next up is our action roll. Free People's player will be rolling 4 action dice. And they roll 2 muster army, and a character die. Shadow player has recovered a total of 8 dice with the addition of the Witch King, Chief of the Ring Wraiths, but 2 eyes have been placed in the hunt box, so he'll be rolling 6 dice. And he rolls an additional 2 eyes, which we're going to have to place into the hunt box, moving that up to a total of 4. His other dice are a character, event, an army, and a muster die, a little bit of each. And now it's action 5, and we're ready to resolve our action resolutions. Shadow player has a total of 4 action dice, and the Free Peoples have a total of 4 action dice, so we can't pass, we'll have to play a die. And I think we're going to play an event card, and we're going to use a muster die, and we're going to play Guards of the Citadel. That reads, recruit 1 Gondor unit, regular or elite, and 1 Gondor leader in Minas Tirith. So I'm going to select an elite unit and a leader, and we'll place those in Minas Tirith. It helps to bolster that defense there. And now it's the Shadow player's turn. He has a total of 4 action dice, 1 Shadow token, 5 event cards, and 2 faction cards with the Witch King. So we'll make our d20 roll consulting Sauron's gaze table. There are no modifiers currently active. The roll is a 2, and that's going to be military matters. So we're going to consult Table C, find out where Sauron's focus is located. The roll is a 12, and that is Umbar and Harad. So our focus region is Umbar and Harad, and we're going to go through our priorities list. Use a muster die to bring in any minion into play that adds an action die to the pool. Well, we don't have any that directly apply to Harad, so we'll continue on. Use a muster die as a diplomatic action to advance the focus location on the diplomatic track. That we can do. So we are going to play a muster die, and we're going to move the Southrons and Easterlings on the diplomatic track. And that is going to place them at war. So all of Sauron's forces now are active. Free People's player are up now. We cannot pass because we have 3 action dice to their 3 action. So we'll have to make a play, and I'm a little leery about attempting to advance the Fellowship with 4 eyes in the pool. If we do end up using that character die to move the Fellowship, we would not be able to hide them if they are revealed. I think what we're going to do is we're going to play a muster die, and we are going to activate a faction. We're going to activate the Eagles of the Misty Mountains. If the Fellowship's last known position is not in Rivendell, or Gandalf the White is in play, you may use 1 muster or recruit faction die result to bring the Eagles into play. So that's what we're going to do. Starting setup says to place 2 Eagles in Eagle's Ear. In addition, by activating them, the Free Peoples are going to gain a faction die for next turn. That'll be added to their dice pool. So we're going to place 2 Eagles in Eagle's Ire. And that gets us that faction die, which is important. Shadow player is up next. He has 3 action dice and an action token to use. We'll make the roll on his gaze table. There are no modifiers. Here's the roll. Roll is a 9, and that's going to be military matters. So we're going to consult table C and see where his focus lies. Roll is an 11, and that's going to be Isengard. His focus is on Isengard, and his primary objective is Helm's Deep. Now, Isengard is currently at war. So we'll use our military priority chart. The first one would be to use a muster die to bring a minion into play that adds an action die to the pool. Well, we would be bringing Saruman in, but we have no muster die. Next one is use a muster die as a diplomatic action. And Isengard is already at war. Use a muster die or a recruit faction die to bring a faction into play. Well, we have no muster die to do that with. Use an action die to play a strategy event card that relates to the focus location. Well, we have 2 strategy cards. The first one is Palantir of Orthanc. Play on the table if Saruman is in play. Well, he's not in yet, so we can't do that one. The other one is Horde from the East. Play if the Southrons and Easterlings are at war. Well, they are, but that doesn't relate to Isengard, so we'll continue on. Next one is use a muster die to bring a minion into play that relates to the focus location. We don't have a minion die. Use an action die to attack an objective region within the focus location. Well, that we can do. I'm going to play an army die, and they're going to declare an attack on the fords of Eisen. I'll move that combat off to the side and we can resolve it. Our first step is to determine our battle strength and the number of leadership rerolls we'll have available to us. Shadow player has a total of 5 units there, so he'll be rolling an attack strength of 5. So we'll give him 5 attack dice. The Rohan units have a strength of 2, and they also have a leader reroll available to them, and we'll mark that with a blue counting chip. Next step is to determine if we're going to be playing combat cards. In this system, the Free Peoples will declare whether they're going to play a combat card or not. Then the Shadow player is going to make a die roll, and if his roll is less than the total number of combat cards that he has available to him, he will play a combat card randomly, a random card. Free Peoples are going to play the card Confusion. Every unmodified die result of 1 on the Shadow player's combat roll scores 1 hit against the Shadow army. Any result of 1 cannot be re-rolled again during the leader reroll. Shadow Player has a total of 5 cards that could potentially be used as a combat card. So we're going to make a d6 roll, and on a result of 4 or less, a result less than the total number of cards, they'll attempt to play one randomly. Roll is a 3, so they will be playing a card. So what we're going to do is we're going to randomize all of our combat cards that are available, and we're going to flip them over one at a time, and we'll play the first card that is tactically possible to be played for the Shadow Player. First one is Onslaught. After removing casualties from the combat roll and leader reroll, you may inflict and apply up to 4 additional hits against your units. Roll 1 die for each hit you inflicted to your units and score a hit against the enemy on a result of 4+. Well, that is valid, and therefore they will play that card. All right. Now this battle is taking place at the Fords of Eisen, which is going to give them some defensive benefits. During the first round of combat, the attacker is going to be at a -1 to his rolls, so only 6s will count. And here is the first combat. We'll have to re-roll that one. All right, we have 1 hit on either side. 6 and a 6 here. All right. Now their confusion card is going to add a hit for every 1 that the Shadow Player rolled to the Shadow Player. So that's going to be another hit for the Free People's player. And now we're going to make our leader reroll for the Rohan units. They'll be able to reroll that missed 3 that they rolled here and see if they can get a hit. And they did. So they have a total of 3 hits right now. All right. Now we have this Onslaught card. After removing casualties from the combat roll and leader reroll, you may inflict and apply up to 4 additional hits against your units. Roll 1 die for each hit you inflicted to your units to score a hit against the enemy for each result of 4 or greater. So we have to remove casualties now. The attackers had 1 hit, so that's going to remove 1 Rohan unit. Rohan has a total of 3 hits, so we're going to take 3. Well, I think we'll downgrade the elite unit. That'll be 1 casualty. And then we'll take 2 and 3. And those will go back to the force pool for the Shadow Player. Now, he can take an additional casualty and make another roll and attempt to take out those Rohan units. I think what he'll do is he's going to take 1 casualty. And that will allow him to roll an extra attack die, and on a result of 4 or greater, he's going to win the battle. The result is a 2, so that's a miss. Now the attacking player can decide to discontinue the attack, or we can continue the attack, and then the defender would have the option to retreat. And I think considering the damage we've taken, forces of Isengard are going to suspend their attack. We'll return those pieces back to the board. Forces are returned to the map, and that Rohan unit is out of the game. It's permanently eliminated. The Isengard casualties are placed back into the force pool. Not a good start for the Shadow Player. And that's going to have a diplomatic effect, that attack. So that is going to activate Rohan. Nation is now active. That's also going to advance them 1 step on the diplomatic track. Well, it's the Free People's player's action again, and we might have an opportunity here. With that failed attack at the Fords of Eisen, I think we're going to use the Muster Army die. And we're going to do a diplomatic action on Rohan. So we're going to spend the muster die, and Rohan is now 1 step from at war. And we'll have to see how the shadow player responds. We'll have him make his roll on the gaze chart. Roll is an 18, and he's going to be hunting for the ring. So we're going to consult table E. And we'll go through the priorities on table E. We've already brought the Witch King in. Play a character event that will target the Fellowship. Well, let's take a look at our character events and see what we've got. Shadow player has 3 character events. First one is Nazgul's Search. Play if the Fellowship is on step 1 or higher of the Fellowship track. That one won't be able to be used. Palantir of Orthanc. We need to have Saruman in play. That one cannot be used. Then we have the Lidless Eye. Change up to 3 unused shadow action die results into eye results. Play these dice in the hunt box immediately. Well, that one really won't help us. We're nearing the end of the round, so we'll go on to the next priority. Next priority is play a faction card that allows a faction to target the Fellowship. Well, we don't have any factions in play, so we'll move on. If the Fellowship is not in a Free People stronghold, use an action die to position Nazgul or armies into the last known location of the Fellowship to gain hunt rerolls. That one we might be able to do. Well, the shadow player only has a character action die and an event die, so I think the only choice we'll have is we're going to play a character action die, and we're going to activate the force in North Anduin Vale. That can accomplish 2 things at the same time. We're going to leave 1 unit behind, have a line of communications back to Dol Guldur, and we'll move the rest of the force into Dimral Dale, and that potentially would act as some hunt rerolls in the future. That would be a likely place that the Fellowship may travel. So we'll play that character action die. And now it's the Free People's player. We have a couple options. We have 1 character die remaining. We could play the Athelas card. That would be a little bit of a waste because we've only got 1 point of corruption at this point. The other card is Challenge of the King. That one isn't able to be played. We could play a special action from either Gimli or Legolas, and I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to use Legolas's special ability, and that says Prince of Mirkwood. If Legolas is in an elven stronghold, you may use any action die to advance the elven nation 1 step on the political track. So we'll have him play the character die. We don't want to move the Fellowship with 4 dice, 4 eyes in the hunt pool. So we'll advance the elves on the diplomatic track. So we'll play that character action die, and the elves now are going to be moved down on the diplomatic track. They're approaching the war box. That's going to complete all of the action dice that are available to the Free Peoples, and there's 1 action die left for the Shadow. And since this is our last action die, we can play that to any effect we choose rather than rolling on the Sauron's Gaze table. So we'll see about playing one of the event cards we have. And I think we're going to use that action die to play Horde from the East. Play if the Southrons and Easterlings are at war. Well, they are. Recruit 5 Southron and Easterling regular units in a free region inside the Southron and Easterlings nation. This region must be adjacent to the eastern edge of the map. All right. And I think we're going to recruit those in South Ruin. That is attached to the east edge of the map. So we'll place 5 Southron and Easterling units in South Ruin. And finally, the SP has no more action dice left, but they do have an action token, and we're going to use that, and that's going to allow us to move our minions. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to move a minion from Barad-dûr to Holland, and that will help to get us some rerolls there if the Fellowship happens to move through there. I think in addition, we're going to move a Nazgul from Morannon to South Ruin. And that will allow us to use a character action die to move that force. We know that the Free Peoples have the potential of activating the dwarves and the elves much faster, so that might be a good move for us. And that is going to end the round. Now, as this is a test playthrough, I'm going to be making changes to the charts as we play through, as I see fit. Now, that battle at the Fords of Eisen, I probably, as a Isengard player, would not have authorized that attack. They didn't have enough force there. So what I've done is I've changed the Table D military priority chart, and especially Note F, use an action die to attack the objective region, or use a muster die to recruit units in the focus location. So I've added that last statement to that. That'll give the Shadow player a little flexibility. I probably would have reinforced before authorizing an attack there. So we're going to make changes to this as we proceed. What I'm planning on doing is I'm going to play this to a certain point and then make any changes that I feel are necessary. And then we're going to restart this playthrough and do a proper playthrough of this with the rules in the best condition that I'm able to get them, and then we'll just make changes as we go. All right, we'll start a new round, and we'll begin with our recover action dice and draw events. Free People's player are going to have 4 action dice plus the faction die that they just got. Now, there was no movement of the Fellowship last turn, so technically the Shadow player will not be required to have to place a die in the hunt box. He's going to get a total of 8 dice with that addition of the Chief of the Ringwraiths. Now we're going to draw our event cards. Free Peoples have drawn Riders of Theoden, the Western Way, and By Chance or by Foresight. That's going to move the Free People's event hand to 4 standard cards and 3 faction cards. Shadow player draws his cards. That will put him at a total of 5 standard events and 3 faction events. We'll move on to the Fellowship phase. The Fellowship is currently in the Fords of Brunnen, and the corruption level is at 1. Fellowship is hidden with 0 progress. And we have the option of changing the guide, and I think we will. I'm going to make Strider the guide. That's going to give us the ability to hide the Fellowship with the play of any die, and I think that might be more useful until we can get some extra dice and make Gandalf's guide ability a little bit more valuable. We'll move on to the hunt allocation. We'll make our D20 roll, and there are no modifiers. Roll is an 18, and that's going to be 3 dice into the hunt box. So we place 3 eyes into the hunt box. We'll move on to our faction die rolls. We'll begin with the Free Peoples. And they roll a total of Will of the West, Muster Army, Character die, and a Recruit Draw Faction Event die. Now it's the Shadow player. He is going to be rolling 5 dice as 3 are in the hunt box. And he rolls 1 additional eye, which will be added to the box. That's a total of 4. A Muster Army and 3 events. All right. And now we're going to move on to our phase 5, the resolution phase. And these are the dice and cards that we have available to us. And I think we're going to play a muster die and activate the card Riders of Theoden. Recruit 1 Rohan unit, regular or elite, and 1 leader in either Edoras or in a Rohan region containing a companion. And I think we're going to place an elite and a leader in Edoras. Now it's the Shadow player's turn. We'll consult the gaze table and make a d20 roll. See what happens. There's no modifiers. Roll is an 11, and that's going to be military matters, so we're going to consult table C and check where Sauron's gaze is focused. He rolls a 1, and that's going to be Angmar or Rhûn, and the primary objective would either be the Shire or Dale. And now checking table D, we'll go through our list and see what we can do with this. First step would be to use a muster die to bring a minion into play that adds an action die to the pool. Well, none of the minions will be able to come into those regions. Use a muster die as a diplomatic action to advance the focus location on the diplomatic track. Everyone is at war, so we'll continue on. Use a muster die or a recruit faction die to bring a faction into play. Well, none of the factions relate to that region, so we'll continue on. Use an action die to play a strategy event card that relates to the focus location. We'll check those out. Well, we only have one strategy event in our hand, and that's Shadows on the Misty Mountains. Recruit 2 Sauron units, regular or elite, and 1 Nazgul in either Mount Graham or Moria. Well, that would work because our focus area is Angmar, so we would be able to do that. So we're going to play that card. We'll play an event die and play Shadows on the Misty Mountains. So we're going to place 2 regulars and a Nazgul in Mount Graham. Alright, that was a good use of that card. And the Free Peoples are up next, and since we have Strider as the guide, we'll be able to hide ourselves in the event of a problem. I think we're going to use a character die and get the fellowship moving. So we're going to play that character die and do a fellowship progress action. Now the problem is Shadow Player has 4 eyes in the pool, plus they're going to get a reroll because of the Chief of the Ring Wraiths being in that space. So we're going to advance the fellowship on the track to 1, and then we're going to have the hunt roll and see what happens. All right, here is the roll. He rolls no successes, so he's going to get 1 reroll though for the Chief of the Ring Wraiths. And amazingly, Fellowship survived that without being discovered, so that's great. We'll place that character die into the hunt box for future rolls. Shadow Player is up now, and we're going to have him roll in the gaze table. The roll's a 4, and that's military matters. We'll see where his military focus is laid. Roll is a 16, and that's going to be Mordor. Their primary objective is Osgiliath. Alright, his focus is on Mordor, and we'll check the priorities chart. Use a muster die to bring any minion into play that adds an action die to the pool. Well, that would be the Witch King or the Mouth of Sauron. So, Witch King is the Black Captain version. Now, we already have him deployed in another capacity as the Chief of the Ring Wraiths. We could change him over, that is a possibility, but not at this time. I don't think that would be warranted. The other one would be Mouth of Sauron, and the Fellowship needs to be on the Mordor track in order to do that, so we'll move on. Muster die for diplomatic action. We're already all at war. Use a muster die or a recruit faction die to bring a faction into play. Well, we definitely can do that. The Broods of Shelob says if the Fellowship's last known position is not in Rivendell, you may use 1 muster or recruit faction die to bring the spiders into play. And that would be warranted, so we'll do that. So we'll bring the Broods of Shelob in. Starting setup, 1 in Dol Guldur and 1 in Minas Morgul. So we'll play 1 spider at Minas Morgul and another at Dol Guldur. And in addition, that is going to award us our faction event die for the next turn. All right. We'll go back to the Free Peoples and we'll see what actions we have available to us. These are the dice and cards we have available to us. And I'm kind of leaning to playing the faction die, using that as a recruit, and recruiting some of the eagles. Recruitment would be 1 eagle in Eagle's Ire. So let's do that. So we're going to play that recruit faction die, and I think we'll place another eagle up in Eagle's Ire. So we've got 3 there now. Next up is the shadow player, and we'll have him make a roll, see what his gaze is at. The roll is a 7, and that's military matters again. We have 2 event dice available to us. We'll make another roll and find out where his gaze is focused. Roll is a 9, and that's going to be in Isengard. So his focus is in Isengard. Going through our list on the military priorities chart, we come to use an action die to play a strategy event that relates to the focus area. I don't think we have any strategy events left. No, those are all character events. Moving through the priority list, we go down to all the way down to I, and that says use an event die to draw a strategy event card. I think I'm going to add a change to that, and that would be to use an event die to draw a strategy event, or use an event die to play a faction event. So let's check that out first, but I think I'm going to add that to that priority list. We have 3 faction cards here, and we've got Black Sails, play on the table if the Corsairs are in play. Evil Things, play if the Fellowship is not in a region containing a Free People's settlement. That would work. Move all spiders up to 2 regions. Then, if at least 1 spider is in the region with the Fellowship, discard a spider and draw a hunt tile. That could be played. The other one would be Death to Forgoil. Attack a Free People's army, including Rohan and or Gondor units, with a Shadow army in the same region with Dunlending figures. Well, none of those cards would really be too good to play with an event die. So I think what we'll do is we'll use the event die and draw a strategy card. So we'll play an event die and draw a strategy card and add that to our hand. I'm going to make that addition to, I think, to the letter I result for table D, though. That'll be to use that event die to play a faction event. We're back to the Free People's player. We have a Will of the West die and a Muster Army die, and those event cards that we could play. So let's see what we come up with here. And I think we're going to use our Muster Army die as an army die. We'll make 2 army movements. I'll move 1 from Helm's Deep into the Fords of Eisen to reinforce that area, and then we'll move this entire force out of Edoras into West Emnet. That'll get us into a position where if they do break through the Fords of Eisen, we'll be able to react into the Helm's Deep area. Or, who knows, move that force into Fords of Eisen and go after Orthanc. They're in terrible shape right now. It's now the Shadow player's turn. He's down to his last die, and that's an event die. So we can play that in any manner that we wish. We'll start by taking a look at our event cards. Alright, our standard events are the Lidless Eye. We can use that to change 3 unused Shadow action dice. Well, that ain't going to help us there. Nazgul Search, play if the Fellowship is on step 1 or higher on the Fellowship track. Move any and all of the Nazgul. Then, if at least 1 Nazgul is in the region with the Fellowship is revealed. Well, that's definitely a possibility. We'll keep that in mind. Pits of Mordor. Play if Sauron is at war. Recruit 2 Sauron regular units in each of 3 different Sauron strongholds. The Lore of the Elven Rings. Play on the table. Before action resolution begins, if any of the Keeper of the Elven Rings die results in an eye, you may change the results shown on any one die in your action roll to another result of your choice. And then the Palantir of Orthanc, that requires Saruman to be there. So those 2 Pits of Mordor and Nazgul Search seem to be pretty good. Well, before we decide, let's put the cards that we won't play off to the side and take a look at the faction event cards that we have. And those are revealed to be evil things. Play if the Fellowship is not in a region containing a free people settlement, and it would allow us to move the spiders. We only have 2 though. Death to the Forgoyle. That would require the Dunlendings to be active. And then Black Sails, play on the table if the Corsairs of Umbar are in play. Well, it looks like we're going to be choosing one of those 2 here. And, well, the Nazgul Search does seem pretty good. Play if the Fellowship is on step 1 or higher of the Fellowship track. Move any and all Nazgul, and then, if at least one Nazgul is in a region with the Fellowship is revealed. So let's play that. We'll use the event die to play that card. Alright, so we're going to be playing that Nazgul Search card, and I think what we'll do is, we already have a Nazgul in the space with the Fellowship. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the Witch King is always considered to be a Nazgul for those purposes. So that's good. I think what we'll do is we're going to move that Nazgul that is up in Mount Graham. Whoops. And we'll move him to a space that the shadow is likely to go in. And I guess we'll put them in High Pass. All right. And now it says that the Fellowship is revealed. So we will reveal the Fellowship. And they have 1 movement point that they can spend to move the Fellowship. All right, so we have to move the Fellowship. They have a progress value of 1. So our choices are either the High Pass or Holland. Now Holland has a army and a Nazgul in it, so that's going to give 2 rerolls. If we move into there, we'd only get 1 reroll by going into the High Pass. I guess we'll take the High Pass. So we're going to move the Fellowship 1 space into High Pass, and then we're going to move the progress down to 0. All right. Now our Witch King card has a special ability. It says he sees, he knows. If the Fellowship is declared in a region which is not an unconquered free people stronghold, you may move the Chief of the Ring Wraiths to the region containing the Ring Bearers. So he's going to do that. He'll follow along into the High Pass. And in addition, he has the Spear of Terror. If the Chief of the Ring Wraiths is in a region with the Fellowship, when you play a character event card, you may immediately draw another character event card. So we're going to do that. We will draw another character event, and we'll add that into our stack of cards, but without looking at it. And that's going to complete all the actions for the Shadow player. And now it's the Free People's turn. We have 1 die left. That's a Will of the West die. And I think we have to use that to hide the Fellowship. So we're going to play that as a character event, and we're going to hide the Fellowship. And we'll move the Fellowship to its hidden side again. All right, that is going to complete the round. We have no victory points, and I think we're going to end the video here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the changes that I had noted to the charts that we discovered while we were playing through this test playthrough. And I think we're going to reset up the game from scratch. And I'm going to start a proper playthrough using the revised tables. And we'll see how that goes. Thank you so much for joining me at the Solo Gamers Club. I hope you're enjoying this test playthrough of the War of the Ring with the Shadowbot. And we'll see if we can improve this a little bit from what we originally came up with. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good evening.